Hi again, everyone. Welcome officially this time to COMS 1910, Introduction to Communication Studies. As you'll know from my unofficial welcome, I'm Allison Harvey, your course director for the year. So all of this information is provided in your syllabus, which is now up on the eClass website. But I just wanted to remind you again that office hours for this class are Wednesdays 3 to 5 or by appointment. We are going to be meeting on Zoom using the booking system that you can find under Connect on the eClass page. And you can also always get in touch by email, which I check and answer Mondays to Fridays from 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. As you can see from the course page, the content for each week will be broken up into short sections, and that's designed to keep you focused and on track. So what I'm going to do in this first little part is actually to just get you warmed up for the class and tell you a little recent story about an event related to communications that's going to give you a little bit of a flavor of the kind of issues and questions that we're going to be engaging with throughout the year. So I call this a taster lecture. It's really, really short. And what I want it to do is to demonstrate both the diversity and the significance of the kinds of questions that we're going to be asking about communications this year, of course, but also throughout your degree. So let's get started. If we were in a classroom right now, I would ask how many of you are Instagram users. I would suspect that quite a few of you are. Now, if you use this social media platform and you're currently located in Canada, you might have noticed in August that they rolled out a new feature on the app that they call Reels. This function allows users to record and edit short-form 15-second videos with soundtracks of original audio or existing music. The next question that I would ask you all in the classroom would be this: does this sound like a kind of communicative media form that we're already familiar with? If you think this sounds an awful lot like the basic functionality of TikTok, you'd be right. So what's behind this? What's behind the development and launch of this new feature on Instagram? How can we explain it? A lot of news venues have reported on the launch of the Reels function by focusing on the idea of business competition. So you can see on the screen here a selection of recent online news stories. And from this you can see that one common framing is that Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, is being used to clone, copy, and/or rival in some way the competing TikTok, which is owned by a company called ByteDance. These news reports also note that Facebook has a long history of copycatting their competitors. Now, what does this tell us? Right away, of course, we can see that communications and media are big competitive businesses. And of course, that maybe there's a little bit of sameness or homogeneity in what's being offered by the media. Also, if you look at the picture of the people in the previous slide, and if you also look at this slide, you can also get the impression that Instagram Reels and TikTok are targeted at and associated and maybe primarily used by youthful audiences. So for example, as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, the image is not even portraying a particular social media. It's portraying three young people taking a selfie at some event. But the use of the phone by young people acts as a symbol to suggest the use of these platforms that might be seen as more youthful. So we might begin to get a picture of a set of ideas outside of the frame, and that comes purely from examining words and images. And we think of this as media framing, the issue being framed by the media about communication businesses and audiences in this case. As this suggests, language, symbols, and visuals play a large role in how ideas are communicated. And we're going to be talking about these kinds of questions related to meaning-making, representation, and symbols in the first few weeks of this semester. In addition to the subject of media companies battling it out, there are also some political issues at play here. So was Instagram just stepping into a potential void that might be left by a possible ban of TikTok? We can think of this as the Trump versus TikTok storyline, which is an attention-grabbing narrative about how the American president issued an executive warrant in early August of 2020 saying that TikTok had until mid-September to find an American buyer or they would be banned in the US. The rationale given is that because TikTok is owned by a Chinese social media company, they could be compelled to share user data, use the platform to spread misinformation, or otherwise mobilize a media form that's used by 100 million Americans for the purposes of espionage. This element of the story opens up many questions and topics that are relevant to communication studies. So the technologies and platforms and content that we consume across different platforms are produced and managed by organizations that operate in a specific context. And those contexts are influenced by geopolitics, such as in this case, the relationship between the American and Chinese governments, which have been tense for several years. Media companies are not just pawns of governments, though. They are extensions of different states. The way that governments relate to the media in their countries differs not only from the simple perspective of freedom of the press versus local total state control. And we're going to see this when we discuss ideas from the approach known as political economy of communication, and also when we talk about ideas related to technology, policy, and infrastructure. Our communication landscape is always shaped by politics and their influence on ideas about the role of the media. We're going to talk a lot also about public opinion and public sphere, because this has a really important consequence for democracy. And this has only become much more complex with globalized communications and international networked media, such as social media platforms. Part of the complexity that's introduced by studying new communication technologies is the normalization of new business models based on the collection of user data. A reality for newer generations of media users that's nothing to think twice about. It's nothing new. So the article reporting on young TikTok users suggests that the majority of them are unbothered by the criticism that's been levied at the platform about data collection and privacy, because it is all they know of communications, really, as you can see from the quotes on the screen. This article goes on to quote Annie, a 19-year-old TikTok user who downloaded the app to pass the time during quarantine and now uses it daily. She says that she finds the US government's focus on China ridiculous when US companies do the same. And she says, quote, "Our personal data is collected by endless amounts of private corporations who just sell our details to the highest bidder. It feels a bit ridiculous to worry solely about China when it seems everyone is literally recording us as we grow up." Now, these are also key questions for communication studies, especially from the angle of a perspective that we're going to explore called audience studies. So rather than framing people as simply ignorant or dupes of the media, this approach considers how people use the media and understand the content they consume. In this case, we might think of the statement, "I don't care," as an interesting direction, because the article, again, if we think about media framing, focused on the question of data collection, users' data, rather than those other questions about, for instance, government censorship, misinformation, or espionage. So it's always interesting to look again at how is the media putting a frame around a particular issue and maybe leaving things out of that frame. It's also interesting that this article didn't focus on the fact that banning a foreign-owned media in a country is a noteworthy move, because the US is meant to be a democracy, and restrictions on the internet is a thing that we don't normally associate with democracy. It's something that we've seen in cases of Iran, in India, and parts of Africa, but it's quite a new kind of move in North America, and it could set a dangerous precedent. So I've provided you in the notes below with some links to further articles about this. The previous article also goes on to suggest that the decision to ban TikTok could be a response to what happened earlier in the summer when Trump's rally in Tulsa was pranked by TikTok teens and K-pop stans. Users of TikTok organized a campaign for people to book a huge number of tickets without showing up, which then left thousands of seats in the stadium unoccupied. While we cannot know how many of the US president's political decisions are due to pettiness, there is another element of communication interest here, which are cultural questions. While many times the content of TikTok is framed as being of a specific kind of aesthetic and style, maybe more focused on entertainment or silliness, anyone who's been on the platform can say that there's more to the culture of the site. This story goes against the narrative that millennials and those of you who are part of Gen Z are apolitical or unengaged. And it suggests also that communication media are sites of political and social activity beyond formal political kinds of messaging. So the community, activities, and types of communicative norms of the site are themselves rich areas of potential analysis in communications. And the quote here on the screen also suggests that an understanding of the underlying infrastructure of media, in this case the algorithms, is also important. And that's something that we're going to discuss more in the winter term. And I've provided you with a link again in the notes for more information about that element of the story. So I don't want to go on much longer. This is supposed to be a little taster discussion, but I will say there is more to say. TikTok has recently sued the US government, so this is an evolving story. What I wanted to showcase with this recent event was that even with a relatively small story, there's a lot of directions for further exploration and analysis that are opened up. Over the course of the semester and the year, we're going to be discussing a range of ideas, theories, and approaches in communication studies that we could use to better understand the economic, political, social, cultural, technological questions that the launch of Reels opens up. So I've given you some questions here on the screen to ponder. What I hope that this lecture has done actually is to pique your interest for what's coming up and to showcase that there are a diversity of topics to consider, whatever your particular of interest is. And there's lots of room for you to explore it here, especially in the second semester as you are going to be deciding on the topic that you're going to explore in your essay. So take a look at these different kinds of questions. I'm going to be asking you about them in a poll after this video. Thanks very much, and see you in the next video.